What if you could quit your job in just 10 years? What if right now you never had to pay another mortgage payment again? What if you could even retire with over $10 million? Well, all of that could very easily be a reality for you if you just did one thing called house hacking. I know there's a lot of videos about this topic, but I think it is so important that I decided to make my own. So first, what is house hacking? House hacking is when you buy a 2 to 4 unit property, live in one unit, and rent out all the others. You can also house hack by renting out an ADU on the property, your basement, or even extra rooms in your home. These are all forms of house hacking. Of course, it is not always practical or even available for most people to rent out rooms in their own home. Or you could be renting yourself right now. So I would recommend you start searching for a duplex, triplex, fourplex, a property with an ADU on it, or a property with enough land to build an ADU on it. The reason this strategy doesn't work with properties that have more than 4 units on them is because that will generally require commercial financing. You won't be able to maximize your returns the same way you can with residential financing using an FHA loan. Some requirements to buy a property using an FHA loan are a down payment of at least 3.5%, a minimum credit score of at least 580, debt to income ratio of at least 43%, and to intend to live on the property for at least 1 year. You can also do this using a conventional loan if you have at least a 20% down payment saved. So I want to go over the steps to start searching for a house hack opportunity. First, find a realtor that is familiar with this concept. You can look at the BiggerPockets website under the Agent Finders tab, or if you're in the Central Virginia area, I'm a realtor as well. When interviewing realtors, ask them questions like if they have ever helped someone house hack or if they have ever helped someone buy a 2 to 4 unit building. Because many realtors have only dealt with single family homes, you will quickly realize if they understand your objective. When searching, make sure you can afford to live in the property even without the rents coming in, because there is always a chance of vacancy. This is an investment, but it's also your primary residence, so you don't want to put it at risk. Once you have found your realtor, tell them to set you up on 2 separate MLS searches. One search is every 2 to 4 unit building in the areas where you feel comfortable living in and you can qualify for based on your down payment and income. The other search is to send you any properties that you qualify for that have keywords like granny, accessory, dwelling, or mother in the listing description. This means you will automatically receive an email anytime a property that has 2 to 4 units or that has an ADU on it is listed. Once you start receiving properties, you will run your numbers differently depending on your goal. BiggerPockets has a house hacking calculator as well, or you could just use a calculator and a spreadsheet to figure out your return on investment. So you can go about running your numbers in 2 ways. You have the option to move out each year, buy a new property, keep your old one, and rent out the unit you were just living in. Or you could just stay at the same property and take that money that you're saving on the mortgage payment towards new investment. This way you are not constantly moving and you don't have to run your numbers based on the fact that you're moving out in 1 year. When running your numbers, if you plan on staying in the same property, your main goal should be to come close to break even or even make a little profit from the rent of the extra units compared to your mortgage payment. If you plan on repeating these steps each year and moving out, you should run your numbers like you are going to rent all the units and not live in one to ensure that it will positively cash flow after you leave. Don't be afraid to put a lot of offers in on property. When you find those 2 to 4 unit or ADU properties, figure out how much you can pay to get your desired return and write your offer at that price. Also, if you put in an offer that the seller rejects, check back in every 2 weeks to see if the property has gone pending, and if not, talk to the listing agent and potentially submit an offer again. Most of the time, the longer it's been listed, the more flexible the seller will be with the price. So once you close on the property, make sure to do background checks on potential tenants. Once you have successfully rented out the property, you will be living for free or pretty close to it with the tenants paying your mortgage for you. Okay, so here's an example of a duplex if you've never seen one before. This is one unit, this is the second unit. They have separate kitchens in here, separate garages, separate everything. There's a wall right here that splits this property into 2 different units. But you're the owner of the entire property. All right, so here's some example numbers. Say you bought the property for $350,000, you got a 6% interest rate. Your down payment was 3.5% or $12,250. Your mortgage payment at these terms would be around $2,000. Let's say you can get rent for $1,800. So after the first year, the value of the property goes up 3.5%. Maybe you did some work to it, or maybe it just went up in value 3.5%. That's pretty standard, but that's a 3.5% increase on the value of the property. You only put 3.5% down. So the new value would be $362,250. So that's an unrealized 100% rate of return because you only put down $12,250 and the value went up by that amount. Also, your tenants helped you pay around $4,000 off of the principal of your loan balance. So this goes on top of your 100% unrealized return in the form of equity in the home. You can access this equity later when you have more equity built up by selling, refinancing, or using a home equity line of credit. So both appreciation and principal pay down are both unrealized gains because you're not selling or refinancing or anything. Your realized gain would be $21,600 because you saved that in mortgage payments from the rent. Meaning for an entire year, you only paid $2,400 in your entire housing expense. That is a lot of money that you can put towards buying more properties, and this is pretty much training wheels for being a landlord. You get an entire rundown of buying an investment property at the same time as buying your own primary residence. And your tenant is right beside you, so you can learn about the problems that come up with tenants and leases without risking your property being damaged without your knowledge, because you will hear and see everything going on. But what if you don't want to be a big landlord and deal with tenants and just want to stash away your money in the stock market? Either way you want to go about it, think about how few properties you need or little stock investments to be financially free or retire early with such little housing expense. Stock returns are much easier to calculate in this way, so I based this off a 10% rate of return, which is pretty normal for our S&P 500 index fund. Let's say you only put money into the stock market that you made from the rent. You don't put any other money in from your job. You just spent all of that on personal expenses and maintaining the property. Let's also say rent goes up 2% every year. That's pretty conservative. So after 10 years of investing at a 10% return, you would have a little over $400,000 in the stock market. And because your rent has been increasing 2% every year, now your rent is at $2,200 instead of $1,800, and your tenant is paying you $200 over the mortgage payment instead of you having to pay $200 for your mortgage. You could potentially retire after just 10 years if you live frugally with this $400,000 because your housing situation is paying you $200 a month. You can use this $400,000 to pay for your other smaller expenses. Or you could try to only work part-time or start a new business. After 20 years of investing, you'd be a millionaire. You would have over $1.5 million just in the stock market, and your property's value would have at least doubled by then to at least $700,000. Then after 30 years, you'll have over $4.6 million in the stock market, and your property will also be paid off at that point. With the 2% increase in rent over 30 years, your tenant will now be paying you over double of the original rent. The tenant would now be paying you $3,665. I had ChatGPT do the math on that. So in 40 years, this calculator only went from 1 to 30, so I had to pick up where we left off on 30. So after 40 years, you would have almost $13 million just in the stock market, and your tenant would be paying you at least $4,000 a month in rent by then with no mortgage payment. And your property would now be worth over $1.5 million at a 3.5% appreciation rate. Then just imagine the real estate portfolio you can build over time by just investing the money that you saved in your mortgage payments into new properties and eventually refinancing them. In that case, you'll have multiple properties cash flowing, appreciating, all the loans will be getting paid down, and you will be receiving massive tax benefits from depreciation. And yes, you are able to use the depreciation tax write-off when house hacking. So hopefully that helped you see how powerful house hacking really is. All my information will be in the description, and feel free to comment any questions you have.